Welcome. This is Siona from Honouring ME and we're at lesson 3 of my beginner series for learning to crochet. So by now you'll be comfortable and confident with how to make the basic stitches. Your tension will be consistent and your stitches will look even. If you're not quite there yet, that's okay. Continue with the beginner series, the basic stitches, until you are. We all learn at our own pace, so take as little or as much time as you need. This lesson is a much bigger lesson. It's designed to get you familiar with how to work in a round or a row. So by the end of this lesson, you'll have the know-how and be confident to know the difference between a round and a row, how to count stitches, how to count rows and rounds, how to make a turning chain and know why it is needed, making a slip stitch, which we covered in the first lesson, but we'll show it with the rounds, starting a round using a chain stitch, starting a round using the magic ring, work in a circle, work in a square, how to fasten off, and when we're working in a row, we'll learn how to increase and decrease stitches. So, as I said, there's a lot to learn in this lesson. I encourage you to follow it at your own pace and practice and feel confident in each step before moving on to the next. Once you master one, as with everything, it becomes easier to master the next. You might also find that you start to develop a preference for the type of crochet work that you like, and it's okay to not like everything. The important part is to love what you do and love what you make. So let's get started. Step 1 of this lesson is knowing the difference between a round and a row. So in front of me you will see 3 pieces of work, each of them looking slightly different. So the first one, this is worked as rows. So you can see you've got back and forth rows of stitches. Fairly easy. Okay, now these 2 are both worked in a round. This one in circles, can see, and this one, your classic granny, is still a round, but as you can see, it's quite square. So this lesson we're going to learn how to make each of these. Okay, so your square, your circle, and your rows. Step 2 is how to count stitches. Now, it's going to vary between stitch to stitch, but generally you can count either the top of the stitch or you can count the post of the stitch. So I don't know how easily you can see that. But this is a square made in half double crochet. So each post here, you can count. So in this one, I've got a border on it, but we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And there's ones in the edge that you can't see. If you want to count the top, got the V's, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. You're looking at a round, you need to know where you're starting from. Generally, if we start here, again you've got the post of the stitch. This is in a thicker yarn, so it's a little bit easier to see, but this is also double crochet. So you've got 1 stitch, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you can continue to count around. That's why I also recommend working in a lighter yarn to begin with. It's easier to see the definition of the stitches. If we work with this one, These have been made granny square, but they're in groups of 3. So you've got 1, 2, 3. You can count the top. 1, 2, 3. Okay. It'll become easier as you get more familiar with the stitches. Step 3 is how to make a turning chain. So the turning chain is needed to get you from one row to another. So like this piece of work gets you into the next row so that you've got nice, even, consistent rows. So once you get to the last stitch on your row, depending what stitch you're working with as to how many you chain to turn. So this is a double crochet, and in my patterns I would generally request that a turning chain is 2 chains so that it's not counted as a stitch when you're doing a double crochet. So we would just do 1, 2. So you've got your turning chain, and then you're ready to start the next row. If you're going to be doing a single crochet, you would do 1 chain, a half double crochet. In my patterns you would do 1 chain. Others, if they're counting it as a stitch, you will do 2 chains. And double crochet for me will be 2 chains, but most patterns when they count it as a stitch, it'll be 3 chains. So then when you start, you've got the height of your stitch ready for the next row. Okay. Step 4 is how to make a slip stitch. Now we did cover this in lesson 2, but we'll cover it again here because this is where we'll end up using it more. So we've got ourselves a chain, and for a lot of patterns working into the round, you will start with a chain for a circle. So we've got our chain, we're going to insert that into the last chain, yarn over, pull through, and then pull through again, and you've got your circle. So now, this time we're going to make a start, so we'll make our turning chain. So that's start. Okay, and I'll work some double crochets into the circle, and then we'll show a slip stitch at the end of the round. How many have I worked here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so we've worked 8, do 9, so I made it a big circle, 10, okay, so we've made a circle, so we want to join that circle so we can get to the next round. So we identify first stitch at the start of the round. It will be easiest to identify through the V's. So we've got little turning chains tucked away in there. So this here is going to be our first stitch. So we're going to insert the hook in the V of those at the top of the stitch. We're going to yarn over and pull it through that V. So both to the top 2 loops on that we're going to pull through, and then we're going to pull that same loop through there, and then we've got ourselves a joined together circle. And there's a slip stitch. Now if I wanted to work across into this stitch, then I would then slip stitch across. So you go across, so insert, pull through, and now I can work from 2 stitches across. Step 5 is how to start a round using a chain circle. So as you can see, we've got a chain here and it's made up of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chains. The pattern will tell you how many chains to start with. Generally it's between 3 and 5 depending on the size of the yarn, how many stitches you need to work into the circle. Okay, so we're going to join that circle together as a slip stitch, as we've already done in the previous step. So insert in, pull through. Okay, so we're going to work a double crochet into the circle. So I'm going to chain 2. Some patterns will make you chain 3 and count the stitch. I don't like to. So we'll create, so when you're working into the circle, you're not working into the stitches, you're using the chain and you're going to work around it. So you're going to insert your hook into the middle of the circle. And you're going to, so we've yarned over for the start of the double crochet, insert your hook into the circle, yarn over and pull it through the circle, and then complete your stitch. Now another handy thing is you've got your tail of your yarn here. I like to work it in so that I don't have to weave it in later. So we're going to work, we'll look at 10, we'll do 12, stitches. So we've done 1, so yarn over, into the circle, complete the stitch. Yarn over, so that's 2, 3, 4. You might need to move the stitches around the circle to make more space. 5. If you do find it difficult, you can chain more and make a bigger circle to start with. I've lost count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm really bad at counting. 9, 10. 11, last stitch, 12. So you can see it gets a little bit snug there by the end. That's my tail that I can then pull to tighten. And then we close with the slip stitch. So you've got the top of the first stitch. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh, that's the top there, this one. So slip stitch, push through the 2 V's at the top of the stitch, yarn over, pull through, and you've got your circle. Now the next one we're going to learn will be the magic chain. So the major difference with this one, as you can see, you've got a little hole left in the middle. You might not want that for some patterns like a hat, which is where the magic ring, while it's more difficult, I find it more manageable. But if you're making a square or something that needs a lot of wear, for example a blanket, I have found when I've used the magic ring, some of my blankets have started to pull apart. So if you use a chain, you've definitely got a more secure start. But that's working into the circle. Step 6 is how to start a round using a magic circle. Now this one can be a little bit trickier, but the bonus, if we see on this one, is you can pull it tight and not have such a hole left at the start. Whereas this one was used a chain and you've got a big hole. Okay, so similar to how you start with a slip knot, how you're going to make your magic ring, you're going to put the loop around, and you're going to hold it. You're going to need a decent sized tail as well, because you'll find as you work it that will start to pull up. Okay, so you need to hold your tail, your loop, together between those fingers. So you're going to insert your hook into the middle of that loop. You're going to yarn over, you're going to pull up. So you're going to secure it now with your chain. So 1, 2, 3, that's our first stitch. Okay, so similar to working in a chain, you're now going to work into that circle to the side that's got the extra yarn. So you can see here we've got 2 going that way and 1 going this way, so we're going to work towards our yarn hand. I'm going to do a double crochet, so yarn over into the circle, yarn over, pull through, and then work the stitch. Again, yarn over, work into the circle, pull it through, yarn over, finish your stitch. We'll continue. So this one gives you a little bit more flexibility. You need to learn to keep that yarn out of the way. So then what's going to happen is you can then pull on that to make the circle smaller. So we'll do a few more. Over, in. Just make sure that you're always working over where you've got the two strands. Can make it easier to count your stitches before you pull it tight too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We'll work 12, so 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so you can see we've got our stitches. Now to close that, you hold the last stitch and you're going to pull on that tail. As you pull, brings them, and you can see we end up with a much smaller circle than we did in the previous step. You can then slip stitch those stitches together. In this one I did use the chain 3 to count as the first stitch. So we'll work into the V's, pull through, and you've got your circle. So now you can keep pulling it until it closes. This is my preferred way to start a circle, but it does take some time to get used to working with it. Step 7 is how to make a square. So in this we'll start creating a granny square. So as you can see, we're working in a round, but we're getting ourselves some corners. So to make this, we're going to make stitches for the bases, and to get corners we'll use chain stitch. So we'll work in the double crochet, which is what the granny square uses. and the chains. So let's get started. So I've already created my circle and joined it together with a slip stitch. Now we're going to work into that. So I'm going to chain 3, and that will count as a stitch. Okay, then I'm going to do 2 double crochets. 1, 2. Okay, so we've worked, this is essentially 3 double crochets. So we're going to chain 3 and 2 double crochet. We're going to create our first corner, and we're going to do it with 3 chains. So 1, 2, 3, and that'll be our first corner. And we're going to work 3 double crochets into that ring. We got 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to make our next corner. You see we've got the corner there between the stitches. So chain 3, 1, 2, 3. And we want to work our next 3 double crochet. So we've got 1, 2, 3. Okay, so there's 3, and now we'll do our chain 3 for a corner. 1, 2, 3, and our last part is the last 3 double crochet. 1, oops, start that one again. Yarn over. 1, 2, 3. Oops. Okay, so we've got our 3 double crochet, and now we need to make that last corner. So we chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then we need to just loosen that. Slip stitch to the first chain 3. So you've got your chain 3 there. So we're going to work into that chain and, work into that chain and slip stitch close, and we've got our first round. So you can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 corners, and you've got your 4 sets of 3 grannies. Now we're going to need to start in this chain, so this is where the slip stitch comes in. So we're going to slip stitch across. So you're going to insert into there. If you're making a multicoloured granny, you could fasten off, but we're just going to stick with the one colour. Okay, slip stitch across till we're in that chain space. Okay, and then we start again. So we chain 3, that's our first double crochet. And then we're going to work into that chain space. So we're going to work 2 double crochets. We already have our chain. Okay, so we're in the corner, we need to make another corner. So the way the squares get bigger is in your corner, you'll create extra stitches to make the row around get bigger. So our corner, we're going, so you might need to pull that across, chain 3, because we do chain 3s in a corner. We're going to work another 3 double crochets into that space. 2, 3. Now we're going to, between each granny, we're going to work a chain space, so we'll create 1 chain. Now the next spot we're going to work into is the corner. So you can see we've just created another corner over here. So we're going to work 3 double crochet into that corner. Loosen my yarn. You can see the stitches slide around that chain so you can squeeze more in. And then because it's a corner, we're going to chain 3. So 1, 2, 3. Then we're going to work into that corner space again and work another 3 double crochet. That's 2. So as you can see, to keep working corners, I'm not going to make the whole corner, it's getting bigger because we've created extra stitches in the corner from the row before. So in every corner, as you work up to a round, you're going to work extra stitches so that you end up with one like this, where you can see in the corners we've worked 2 each time, and then in the chain spaces we've worked 1. And that will give you a flat piece of work as well. So the key here is you need to increase on each round so that it stays flat and you get your square bigger and bigger. This is step 8, how to make a circle. Again, I've already created a chain and slip stitched to make it into a ring, and we're now going to make this into a circle. So we'll do this with double crochet. And to begin, we'll chain 3, which will be our first double crochet. And then we're going to work another 7 into the circle. Again, put into the ring, over, now I usually prefer to make my circle, especially a coaster, with the magic ring, as you can pull it tight and get rid of the holes, but on this occasion we'll make it with the ring. It's easier to handle when you're first starting. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so we've just checked those. We've got turning chain. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It can be a bit tricky to count to start with. Then we're going to slip stitch that to close. Now the trick with rounds and keeping them flat is you've got to increase the number of stitches per round. So with a square you are adding in corners and then you work into those corners. Now with rounds you're going to have to keep count a little bit. Okay, so we've pulled that closed and you've got yourself the first of the circle. So now in this we are going to count the turning chains as a stitch, so we're going to do 3. Now, to keep a round flat, you need to increase by the same number of stitches every row. So for the round 2, you're going to increase by 2 in each stitch, so that you end up, we started off with 8, you're going to end up with 16. So you're essentially increasing the round by the number that you started with, and that will keep it flat. So if you start with 8, then every round you're going to add 8. If you start with 6, every round you'll add 6. You get the picture. Now to increase, so we've got our first stitch, so the second one counts into that first stitch. So you do double crochet. Then you identify the next stitch and you're going to work under those V's. You're going to do 2 stitches into that stitch. 2. And then the next one, identify it, you're going to work 2 into that one. You're going to do that all the way around. By increasing with the same number, you'll keep it flat. Now if you want to make it into a frilly edge, then you would increase by more than what you started with. 1. And the way we make it into little baskets and containers is once you've got the base as big as you like it to be, then you stop increasing and you'll find that it starts to get taller. That's the same with hats. Once you get the top of the hat to the width you need, then you stop increasing and it'll start to make the container. So you see it starts to curl up. Now sometimes when working in a round, you'll just continue going round and round. So that's, you've still got to keep track of where you're at so that you only increase by the right number per row. You see here, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So we've got to work into that last one. 15, 16. Now I like to slip stitch and close the round. So you identify that third chain of the chain marker, turning chain, slip stitch it closed, and you've got yourself a flat round. And then so for round 3, you've got to increase by 8, so you would increase in every second stitch. And then round 4, you'd increase in every third stitch. It becomes a pattern like that. So as long as you keep track of your rows, you can remember which stitch it is that you're increasing in. So we'll increase in the second one, so that'll count as the first stitch. And we'll increase 2 in that round, and the next stitch will increase, or we won't increase, we'll just do 1. Then the next stitch we'll work 2. If you're not sure where you're up to with your increases, because you can get tricky, you can see that you can see 2 together, they're like a V of stitches, and then 1 and 2 together. Okay, so you just keep going round and round like that until you've got your circle, and at the end of each round you can either slip stitch to keep it together, or you can just continue and it'll be like a spiral. Okay, and as I mentioned, from the next round, if I wanted to start making a container, then I would stop increasing and just work 1 in every stitch. And if I wanted to make it into a ruffle, then I would increase by more than the stitches that I started with. There you go. So we're back. This is step 9 for how to fasten off. So as you can see, I finished that round. So I need to slip stitch it to close. So we've closed it. Now the simplest way to fasten off is just to yarn over, pull through, and then you can cut that yarn, leaving enough tail that you've got to weave through, and then you would continue to pull that in and you're done. You fastened off. Then you would weave that tail in at some stage, or if you're working another colour you can crochet it in so you don't have to weave it in. That's fastening off. Step 10 is how to increase in a row. So as you can see, I've got a little patch here, swatch here that I'm making into a ripple. So in this section, I am increasing, and in this section I am decreasing. So I'll explain how this is done. So the increase part is the easiest part. So I've made my turning chain and I'm going to work in. So the way to increase stitches is similar to a round. You work more than one stitch into a stitch. So we've got our double crochets. Okay, so you can see here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 where I've increased. So I'm going to increase into the middle two from the row before. So this one here. Okay, so in this stitch I'm going to do 2. And then in this stitch I'll do 2. So you can see you've got the V 2 stitches into the one. There we have increased. Then we just continue with the one stitch until where we need to decrease. And see, done. So step 11 is how to decrease in a row. Now you can decrease in different numbers of stitches depending on what the pattern calls for. In this I'm going to decrease by 2 because I increased by 2 here by putting 4 into 2 stitches. So over here I'm going to decrease by putting 2 stitches into 4. So if you can see, I've got the last decrease is here, 2 that became 4 that became 2. So I'll continue to do 1. So I'm going to decrease these 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I need to do 1 more stitch here. Okay, so to decrease I'm going to crochet 2 double crochets together. So you're going to start by doing your yarn over and start your double crochet and pull through the first 2. You're then going to stop and you're going to start the next double crochet. So you've got 2 loops on your hook, you're going to yarn over, insert into the next stitch and do the first part of that. Just pull through the first 2 and you'll be left with 3 loops on your hook. And then you're going to complete the stitch by doing a yarn over and pulling through all 3. And you can see you've now made 2 into 1. So we'll repeat that on this one. So yarn over and start the first double crochet by doing the first pull through. Then you're going to yarn over again and go into the next stitch and do the first step so that you're left with 3 loops on your stitch and you've got 2 half formed double crochets. So then you'll yarn over and pull through all 3 and you've crocheted another 2 together. 1, 2. So you've gone from making 4 stitches into 2 and finish off that row. And then you would just continue with that. Got increase and decrease. And that's the end of the next of this lesson.